What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Plant the Seed. You got Nathan and you got Cameron. Hello, Cameron.
What's up, man?
Hello.
How you doing this week?
It's been a crazy week. It's been wild. I've been working a lot trying to deal with like the Michigan dams that broke. So because I work with like emergency services and things, it's been kind of crazy. But it is what it is. Like you can't prevent it. It just happens. How about you?
Uh, it has also been crazy for me. Nothing like dams breaking or anything, but I called the college I'm going to and found out that the reason I never got my acceptance letter, even though I knew I got accepted, was because they sent it to the wrong address. And for the longest time, they had the wrong phone number. It was off by like one number, so they could never get a hold of me. And then I got their number from someone else and called them. I was like, "Where's all this stuff at?" They're like, "We sent it to you." Like, no, you didn't.
Oh no. There's not like stuff in there that like you had to have done earlier, is there?
No, I got everything in on time,
Okay.
and I paid like a deposit, but
Nice.
it I was wondering where everything was, and they sent it to the wrong address.
I bet there's probably some kid at somebody else's house who's thoroughly confused about why they're getting letters, accepted letters to a college.
Yeah, and there's like one letter off. I live on like MO, and they had MO. Like, how do you get that? I don't understand.
Huh. What did you happen to look up like where that could have gone? I've never heard of.
I don't know. They got everything else right, like my number, address, and that I live. And they got the zip code and everything, but they got the street wrong. I don't think that is a street.
Oh my goodness. Well, in after we're done with this, I'll make sure to edit out your address and everything so people don't show up at your house. That'd be fun.
Definitely. I'm careful not to say the numbers. Except my school, one of my teachers came and like took pictures of all of the seniors with like yard signs.
Aw.
And posted it on the internet. Except she took a picture and got my address in the background and didn't crop it out.
Oh no. Well, there you go, guys. You guys could go meet Cameron.
Please don't.
Oh my goodness. So before we get into our quiz question reveal, I can't believe it. We got our first fan mail.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was surprised.
You want to talk about it? I was excited.
Yeah, I think it was yesterday or the day before. My dad just walked into the room. Was like, "You got mail." I was like, "From who?" They said, "From a fan, apparently." And I opened it up, and it was Riley Lawrence's family sending a little letter that said that they've been enjoying the podcast. So it's very nice. We appreciate it.
That's so cool. Thank you. We appreciate you listening. We hope you enjoy it. We love fan mail. I also love cookies and cakes and
Yes. I also love money.
and money.
Kidding. Kidding.
10% goes to Jesus every time. So, but it is nice. All right. So the quiz question for last week was, what does the phrase "wubba lubba dub dub" mean? Do you want to give us the answer? It is kind of sad.
Yeah, it's a little depressing, and I mean, I've been binging a lot of TV shows because of the whole coronation thing, and one of my many shows that I've watched is Rick and Morty, and I love it. It's great. It's now one of my favorite shows. Maybe not suited for younger people, children.
I can definitely say it's not.
Yeah, it's a little inappropriate. It is TV mature, but it's really funny. It's really good. The animation is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And this phrase, so the main character, Rick, one of the main characters, his catchphrase is "wubba lubba dub dub," and he's like screams it, super energetic, like he's happy, like he's about to party. But it actually means "I'm in great pain." So it's a depressing episode. I was watching it. I was like, he's partying and stuff, and he's screaming that, and then another character, Bird Person, is like, he's in great pain. He's depressed.
And the crazy thing is like throughout the show, you hear Rick use this phrase all the time, and you just think like it's his catchphrase, and he loves it, and he's having a blast with it. And then that episode came out and exposed what it actually meant, and I was like, oh, well, that's not great.
I found out from the guy that voices Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
He said that it was like some wapoo poo sound or something like that from like the Three Stooges that was in the script, and he was like, "This sounds stupid," so he just like improvised.
That's so great.
He also, since he does both voices and like to get into character of Rick and everything, he records like super wasted. So a lot of his stuff is improvised, and that's why it sounds so weird.
Oh my word. And that's why it's not for kids.
Yeah, it's definitely not for kids. There's not like a whole lot of swearing until like the third season, but it is like
it's a trip.
It's weird. It's very it's not politically correct.
No, they just don't care. And yeah, it's something. But
yeah.
Speaking of weird things, current events, the world just keeps on getting stranger. So we got another two here. One isn't necessarily like current. It was actually more so like on May 4th, so when you had Star Wars Day. But I found it and I just thought it was a really cool story, so I threw it in there. And then of course, if I can keep finding it, Florida news. It's always something. It's always something. Every week. They just do not disappoint. But to start off, I found this article of an event that was going on in the Philippines, actually in Manila, where basically to help enforce the stay-at-home restrictions in the Philippines, they had these villagers that were like going around like on these boats dressed up as like Darth Vader or stormtroopers, basically telling villagers to like stay home. They seemed to be pretty liked by the community though, and they were handing out like bags of like relief supplies or something. So it was pretty neat, but very interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely listen to Darth Vader if he walked up to my house and told me to stay inside.
Oh yeah. Definitely. Are you kidding me? I'm not trying to get choked. Don't need no force lightning smacking me in the face. Oh wait, he never used that though, did he? Oh well.
Yeah, no, he never used force lightning. Not that I remember. Maybe in the comics a little bit, but we need something like that in America. I mean, I don't particularly agree with Gretchen Whitmer, but a lot of people are going out and people are calling them stupid for going out, but also who's going to enforce it? Are you going to like put me in handcuffs because I go hang out with my friends or something?
My favorite are the protesters that are outside protesting with signs that say don't go outside, stay in because of COVID.
Yeah, like, but like you're outside.
Right. I'm like, that seems kind of backwards though. You know, one thing that was really impressive by some of the things that the Philippines were doing is they weren't always necessarily costumes though either. The one photo of Vader that I found was actually like made of plastic or something, and they like handcrafted a statue of Vader that they put on a boat and were just like paddling down the river or whatever, handing out bags to people. I just thought that was the coolest thing.
That is really cool, and honestly, I would probably go outside to like see the statue. It probably wouldn't make me stay inside.
Start running after it as it goes down the river. Like, oh goodness. You know, it's funny though too. I think the gesture would probably be taken a little differently though if they did something similar here in the US. Like, can you imagine looking out your window and seeing an army of stormtroopers like walking down the street?
I would probably start clapping.
That's true. I feel like at some moment, like some pinnacle point, though, you would need like rebel resistance in the street too. Like, you got to have a balance. You can't just have the stormtroopers taking over.
Yeah, exactly. We can use that as an analogy for our actual government. They're basically like the empire.
There you go. That would be a cool event. Stormtroopers everywhere, no resistance because we're all locked in our house. And when the final like COVID-19 restrictions start to loosen up, you start seeing the stormtroopers be overrun by the resistance, and it would be like the most creative and like, what a marketing scheme. Disney, I've already given you the idea of putting little chairs in your line so I don't have to stand up. Here's another one. Get yourself some stormtroopers on the road and a little resistance rebel army, and boom, there you go. Reopen Disney, make it a big thing, have a lot of fireworks. There, ta-da. Imagineering over here. I don't know why I'm not hired yet.
That's the next Star Wars movie.
That's it. You are the Jedi. Like, the story is you.
It like goes back and I mean, it's like super in the future because Star Wars is a long time ago. So we go to present day, and they come to Earth for some stupid reason. I don't know why they would come here, but they like invade Detroit. And that's what happens.
Who knew the long time ago was actually the year 2020? This is it, guys. It's not too long ago afterwards. Or after all. All right, so with that being said, there are some other places that are also trying to, enforce some social distancing. We got our friendly neighbors over there in Florida, who have come up with this idea. Apparently, there's a place in Florida called Gatorland. I've never heard of it. I don't know much about it. But as part of their marketing scheme, they started Gatorland Skunk Ape. I don't know how to describe this one except to say, please take a moment to go and look up on YouTube Gatorland's social distancing skunk ape. You will find a video that is, if it does not become memes, I will be very surprised. It is cringeworthy, but also just right down entertaining and hilarious. So, Cam, did you get the chance to watch it?
Yeah, I watched it. It might be the strangest thing I've watched over quarantine. It's strange. It's really weird.
I don't know how to talk about it, but it's just like you have to experience. That's what this is. You have to experience the skunk ape to understand the Gatorland skunk ape. To essentially like give as brief and like it is not going to do it justice. Let me put it that way. I will summarize what the skunk ape is, but if you want to really understand what's happening over there in Florida, you gotta look it up. But essentially, Gatorland decided to get people back into their parks. They created this character called the skunk ape that like enforces social distancing in like unique ways. Like this skunk ape like saw somebody sneeze and then like not use hand sanitizer, and he like ripped the hand sanitizer off the wall and like threw it at a person. I don't know of any better way to enforce that social distancing and like COVID-19 practices than to have a skunk ape rip hand sanitizer off a wall and throw it at my face. I'm using hand sanitizer now because of skunk ape, so it's working.
Definitely. Also, I don't know about hand sanitizer. I've been saying this for years. It's actually, I wouldn't necessarily say it's bad for you, but it's not good for you because it's like it only kills a majority of the germs. So you're essentially just rearranging the germs that you already have. You're not actually getting rid of anything. You're just moving them around.
Ew.
It's like, hand sanitizer doesn't even really help. So I don't understand why everybody wants it so much.
They're just dancing around on your hands. That's cute. Yeah. Gross.
Yeah, unless you get rid of 100%, it's useless.
Well, whether or not the skunk ape is going to be in the parks or not, if you happen to be in Florida and you go to Gatorland and you happen to catch a glimpse of the skunk ape, please send a photo. I would love to see what this thing looks like. I want to see what it actually does. Gatorland, I really hope you have a skunk ape. Like, I hope it's in the park. Like, if I come to Florida, Gatorland, and I am walking around and there is not a skunk ape that jumps out of the bushes to throw a thing of hand sanitizer at me, I'm going to be very disappointed. I might just actually purposely cough just to see if he'll come out. Try to summon him. Like, where are you? Here I am.
I was home alone yesterday, and so I like to make loud noises to scare my dog, but she's old and deaf and just too lazy to get scared. So I just sounded like a weirdo, which I mean may be accurate. I'm a big fan of H3H3 Ethan and Ela Klein on YouTube. There are some YouTube comedians, and one of his signature moves is like a really exaggerated cough. So I like will either imitate it or like put it on a speaker and turn it up all the way to scare my dog. And she just looked at me with such disappointment. She didn't even care that I was potentially dying of corona. She was like, "You're pathetic."
I wish I was at a level where I was just so lazy. So
She
lazy.
doesn't care.
I couldn't even be scared. Like, not because I wasn't scared, but I was too lazy to be frightened. Like, going to see a scary movie or a haunted house and they jump out. They're like, "Are you not scared?" I'm like, "Oh no, I'm terrified. I'm just too lazy to show it." Oh my.
Yeah, my facial nerves aren't exactly working right now.
That would take effort, and I'm not willing to provide that. So, alrighty, everyone. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here. And then when we come back, we're going to go into our segment 2, learn a little bit more about the Israelites. If you haven't kind of picked up, we are going through pretty much like Genesis through the Bible. And we're going to learn that the Israelites, just like the last 4 or 5 chapters that we've gone through, still don't trust God. Like, they've seen so many miracles and so many things, and they still don't. So we're going to talk a little bit about like where they're at, what they're doing, and how that kind of applies to our lives. So let's take a quick break, and we will be right back. Hello and welcome back to Plant the Seed. I don't know why I feel the need to like repeat the name of the podcast like mid podcast, but we're here still, and you're here still. I hope, but you didn't like leave midway. But welcome back.
Yes, we're still here.
We're going to go ahead and jump into our summary here real fast. Our summary comes from Numbers chapter 15. It's kind of midway through the story. So if you haven't listened to either the other podcast or you haven't been kind of keeping up with the videos that have been posted on Wednesdays on the Beacon Baptist Students YouTube page, I highly recommend kind of starting there. It's going to give you a lot more context with what we're going to be talking about today. As well as some of the other lessons before this. Otherwise, it may feel like you're just like dropped into the middle of the story, and it can be kind of tough to understand. So again, we're going to be looking at primarily Numbers chapter 15. So here's a quick summary. After having a continual lack of faith and making choices from their own hearts, the Israelites miss out on the blessings God had for them. While God had never left them and continued to provide for them, many Israelites felt that God was still not present. To remind the Israelites of his presence and love for them, the Israelites wear a blue tassel on their robes. So that's just kind of like a really brief summary. There is a lot more that you can kind of take from Numbers chapter 15, and especially like the chapters before this. So what we're going to talk about today is more so like what's that word? Like a summary of like everything, or like the pinnacle point of what's happening. Yeah.
English, I don't know.
I think I was going for like communal. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I thought you were trying to say communal. I was like, that's not the word.
That's not it. An entire segment on Nathan and Cameron trying to learn English. It's new. It's coming soon.
Yes.
But a big problem, I think, for the Israelites is throughout this whole story. So not just Numbers chapter 15, just this whole story. They've made choices based on what they felt their heart needed or wanted, rather than trusting what God was actually doing for them. So have you ever made choices based on what your heart desired, like kind of knowing that it probably wasn't what God had intended for you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. 100%. I'd say, especially like as I talk about a lot on here, like my first 2 years of high school, just like all the time, I would just make really stupid decisions based on like what I wanted to do, and I didn't really care about who it affected or what was going to happen in consequence. I just, if I wanted to do it, I would do it, and I didn't care.
Sure.
So yeah, it never ends well.
Nah. And speaking of not ending well, do you have like an example that you can like kind of share the result of maybe a time that happened?
Yeah, I think I don't know about a specific situation, but like working at camp, like you're always supposed to have a smile on your face and like be nice to campers and not talk back to youth pastors or anything, and because it's a church camp and we're supposed to be godly.
Sure.
And so I decided, instead of doing the right thing, I would follow my feelings. And a youth pastor from another church during, I think, field camp told George and I to turn off our music because we were playing NF and like Andy Mineo, so like Christian rap.
Sure.
And he was like, "This isn't Christian. Turn it off." And I should have just like said, "Yeah, we'll turn it off, like just so you don't have to listen to it."
Sure.
But then I was like, "No, it is Christian music, so we're not going to turn it off."
Savage.
Definitely not the right reaction to have, but.
Oh no.
And then he told on me.
Oh.
I didn't get in trouble, but I was told not to disobey the youth pastors again. I'm like, okay.
Nice. I don't even know where to start with this particular question because I've made so many heart choices that like I think part of me was like, oh, God probably wouldn't want that, and then I do it anyways, and the results are never good. The one that I can remember most, and it was really awful, and I really thought to myself that like this is what God wants me to do. And I look back at it now and I was like, oh my goodness, I look like a psychopath. Like, this is clearly not good. But I came home one day and I found out like an old roommate of mine, like, spent, I don't even know, hundreds of dollars on like GTA or something. And I like freaked out because I didn't know how we were going to pay the bills. And so I thought to myself, I'll teach him a lesson. Like, that's what you do, right? Like, if something bad happens, you do something that teaches them like, oh, that's not good. And so he came home and I like ripped all the power out of the room. Like I turned it all off and I like took everything, unplugged everything. I took light bulbs out. It was really rough. And I was like, yeah, this is what God would want. He got home and then like he walked into his room. He's like, Nate, nothing's working. And I was like, because you can't afford to pay your power bill. And this is what happens. This is reality. And then he's like, oh no. Like, what do I do? And I had a bag of cans and I threw it at him. And I was like, well, that's your money. That's what you got now. Like, figure it out. And then I threw a package of ramen at him and told him like if he wanted ramen, the water was off, and so he had to figure out what to do. Long story short, at the moment in that time, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm doing something good. Like, this is for Jesus. Like, this is exactly what I should do. And needless to say, the room that particular roommate does not live with me anymore. I pretty much ran him off, and I don't blame him either. Like, I was pretty awful. But yeah, I think that was at least one time where I followed what my heart desired, thinking that like this is a good thing, and it was not godly at all.
Yeah, I'd say we're definitely all guilty of, especially in our like teenage years, of just following our heart instead of our brain and what God desires for us to do. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't remember exactly what year of high school it was, but like I was planning on like going into like some like really stupid career of I think it was some sort of business, and it was like I would call it like a corrupt type of business.
Sure.
You like not like taxation, but like it was like a way to like scheme people out of their money.
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this for a living because it's lucrative. And then I found out, wait a second, stealing people's money is not a godly thing to do. I probably shouldn't do that. And then I just found out a different way to steal people's money with film.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll take your money and you go to a theater and watch a movie that may not be good.
Who are the real thieves in that scenario, though? The movie makers or the theater selling the popcorn? Because, oh
Definitely
my
theaters.
goodness. Oh, theater popcorn, like,
So expensive.
so expensive. Oh, my word. But yeah, so kind of leading off of that idea of kind of following our hearts and seeing where that leads us to make choices that are just not godly choices, and then having to deal with kind of like the negative results of that. Israelites face the same thing. So they've made the wrong choices. They've made heart choices throughout a lot of this story, to a point where, like we talked about it in the last podcast a little bit, they essentially like miss out on God's blessing. God still blesses them, but it comes much later. They could have had it a lot sooner had they just like trusted God in the first place. But because they don't, they have to like pretty much wander in the wilderness for like a long time, some more time, before God actually can provide that blessing. But although God doesn't leave us, sometimes it can feel like he has. And in the case of the Israelites, the land the Israelites were promised was delayed, again, due to their rebellious nature and lack of faith. As a result, they end up having to wander that long period of time. But have you ever had a time or times when you just struggled to see God in a situation you faced?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say like the summer between my sophomore and junior year of high school, I was like, I don't know if I would call it a phase. It's not a phase, Mom. But like, I was going through some stuff that summer and like all of junior year, and I was like, I've never been like the type of person that's like, this is God's fault. He's abandoned me. But like, I was definitely like, I don't really see him working right now, so I'm just going to take care of this myself. And you know, it definitely didn't end well. I made bad decisions, and well, it's all better now. I saw a professional. It's all good.
There you go.
But it definitely should rely on God, even if it seems like he's not doing anything, but he was obviously doing something. It's just like bigger picture type stuff. It wasn't immediate.
Sure. Yeah, I think my experience was slightly different in the sense of like, I do think that I had gotten to a point in life where I was blaming God. Like I think I was seeing so many different things in my life where I felt like God wasn't there, that my response became, well, I'm supposed to have everything good because I'm saved and that's how this all works. And I had this really like misconception or misunderstanding of like God's plan in my life, that I've been very blessed for God to kind of unravel and show me over time. So I look back and it kind of makes a lot more sense. But in that moment, especially as a teenager, I wasn't having that. And a lot of my anger and frustration was directed towards not seeing God. There was a lot of times like I was kind of the I don't want to say the oddball kid, but I guess that's kind of the best way to describe it. I didn't fit in with the people at like the church necessarily that I was at. Not that they weren't trying to, but like part of me was a little standoffish as well. But I also didn't fit in with kids in the world though either, because I was saved and was brought up in kind of a Christian household and things. So I had like that weird space of like not fitting in with either side and really having to make a choice of which one I was going to follow and which one I wanted to be involved with. But, you know, eventually I came to learn that it doesn't necessarily always feel like maybe God is there, but he's always working. Like he's always got a purpose. And sometimes you won't see that until you're older in life. But if you wait and have faith that God is working something out and your focus is on God more so than focusing on needing financial help, or needing friends or needing people or whatever the case is, if God is the forefront, it always comes out to be something good. But I guess kind of like a follow-up question though to this conversation, and one that I know, at least myself, I've asked myself this a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people ask themselves this too. But why do you think we feel that God's presence is less sometimes? Like, do you think God allows that for a reason?
Yeah, I think like in tougher times, God might like not completely like back off, but like back up a little bit, like to give you some space to like figure things out on your own for a little bit, like to test you, like because he obviously, I forget where in the Bible it says, like I'm paraphrasing, it's like that he won't put anything in front of you that he knows you can't handle. Like everything that you go through, he obviously knows you can handle it. So he'll put a tough situation in front of you, see how you react, and obviously he's working in the background. But he may not be like upfront helping you out because he wants to see like how you'll get closer to him through this tough situation. And I think a lot of people are just like, well, I don't see him working right now. I can't do this on myself. He's like messing me up. And it's a tough attitude.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that statement a lot when I was growing up, and I believe that for a really long time that God doesn't allow things that we can't handle in our lives come up. And I thought about that. It's funny you should mention that. I actually started thinking about that statement here recently, and did a little bit of a Bible study on it just for myself, and wrote down the statement. Like, I've always heard it, God won't give me anything more than I can handle. And one big thing about that statement is there's so many me's and I's and me's or whatever. And what I've come to understand over like looking that back through is I think that, and it kind of goes along with this idea of God's presence, I think God absolutely allows things in our lives that we ourselves of our own power can't handle. Like if we try to do it on our own, it isn't necessarily going to happen. However, what I believe is that God will always be there to provide the need in those situations when of our own ability we can't handle it. So it has nothing to do, I think, of my own ability, but more so what God can do through those. So, for example, there's been times like I've been financially just strapped, like don't have the money to pay for bills or whatever the case is, and of my own ability was already doing everything I could. So in reality, it didn't matter what I had. It didn't matter what I was going to do. I had to look at a stronger or higher power to provide that. I had to lean on God to provide that, and God came through, and he always does. But one, in terms of like God's presence too, I had one of the teenagers told me this one time, and it just blew my mind. Teenagers, you're some smart kids. Let me just put it that way. You see things in ways that I think a lot of adults, we get old and we get crabby or whatever, and we stop like thinking. I don't know, having a childlike mindset sometimes. But anyways, this one teen told me, he said, when you're doing a test in real life, so let's use like the ACT or the SAT. When you're doing a test in real life, the teacher isn't necessarily going to come over and do it for you. They're not going to necessarily come over and hold your hand through the test. The test, like they're present, they're in the room, they're there if something goes wrong, but they are not going to necessarily give you the answer, because then what's the point of the test? The test is for the student to learn or to practice what they've learned, not for the teacher to walk them through it. And if we think about that in situations with God, and maybe why God allows that to happen to us, like why does God allow tough things to happen to people? I think it has a lot to do with that test, that trial. He's not gone, he's not left, but if you're in a test, the whole point is to see what you've learned, and you don't get that if you're expecting to have your hand held throughout your test or your trial.
Yeah, it's like you're not really gonna learn if you're like babied through it the whole way. Mm-hmm. It's like the only way to learn is to actually figure it out yourself. And I find it much more difficult to like make it through a situation without other people's help. But once I like make it to the other side, I'm like definitely a much better person for it.
Sure. I think another thing too with tests, have you ever had a teacher that like when you take the test they like mark on the paper like the answers you got wrong and they give it back to you. I don't know if that's just a popular thing for teachers.
Yeah, I think that's happened to me before.
Okay, the one thing I love when a teacher does that is like, especially if it wasn't the final, it was more so like just a test throughout the year. I would save those tests and then like study the questions that I had gotten wrong so that when I faced the big test, I was able to actually pass those questions I had originally not gotten right. And I think the beautiful thing or the awesome thing that God allows us to do is he does the same thing. Even if you fail the test, even if you don't do well, he still provides you the answers to what the test questions were. If you're reading your Bible and you're building a relationship up with God, through those things, God will show you the answers to the questions that you failed the first time. But the thing is just like if we were a student and didn't study the answers we got wrong to pass the big test, we'd still fail the same question. We do the same thing with our lives nowadays. God's saying, here's the answer to the test that you failed, so that next time you face that test, you can do well and you can succeed. And as people, what we end up doing is we just go, oh, I got it wrong. Well, it's God's fault. And we throw our hands up in the air. We blame the teacher. We walk away. It doesn't help.
Yeah, and I'd say I've had very similar situations. Like my science teacher, she like we have a final like I think every quarter. It's like half the way through the semester and at the end of the semester, and she'll like I think the day before or like the beginning of the week that we have the final, she'll like give us all the tests throughout the whole semester and like let us correct it and review them, and then we can actually use them. Like so some tests are like open note tests, and instead of like letting us use our notes, she'll like let us use the old test. So it's like we've practiced for the final with all these tests, and if you gotten stuff wrong, you were given an opportunity to see what you got wrong, and then you could use that information to not get it wrong on the final. And usually if you correct your first test, the final test, you end up getting a much better score. So it's essentially like, I guess, how God works.
Yeah.
In a way.
I'll break the wall here too. I don't know if we can do that. Is there a wall on podcasts like with theater? Oh well, I'm gonna break it. I'm gonna address audience here. If you're somebody who is struggling with that, if you're somebody who's struggling with blaming God, if you're in a real world situation, there are absolutely teachers out there who like maybe aren't necessarily, I don't want to say great at teaching. Maybe they don't meet your level of what you need as a student. So you might be able to say like, oh, part of why I struggled as a student was because the teacher didn't teach in a way that I understood, or whatever the case is. In the case of God, that doesn't work that way. You have the best teacher who specifically understands you as a person, sometimes even better than you understand yourself. So if you're struggling with God as your teacher, I think it's never going to be that the teacher is the issue. It's always going to be, where are you as a student? Are you as a student actually focusing on what the teacher is teaching? Or are you just fighting a teacher who's actually a decent teacher? It doesn't work the same way like you might be able to do with your history teacher or science teacher or whatever in your schools. This is a whole different scenario. This is a teacher that understands you. So if you're having that trouble or struggle, maybe take a look and see like, what are you doing as a student? Maybe it's the student issue, not a teacher problem. But kind of to summarize the rest of this here, in chapter 15 of Numbers, we also learn that as a reminder for the Israelites start wearing a blue tassel on their robes or at the end of their robes to essentially symbolize God's presence. So if they didn't necessarily feel him in the moment, or maybe they couldn't necessarily see him like working in, like at this point, they've seen the ocean open, they've seen a cloud of light or fire, and then they've had cloud during the day. They've seen big scary clouds on a mountain, so they've seen God's presence. But so that they have this reminder all the time, they tied this blue tassel on their robe so that if they looked down, they knew it was God. But do you have something that when you see it in your life, Cameron, like it just reminds you of God's presence in your life?
Yeah, definitely. I think mostly it's like anything to do with Camp Chautauqua. It's like because I've worked there for a few years, and a lot of stuff has happened, and God has worked a lot through that camp, and like seeing the people there.
Sure. I feel the same way with like whenever I go, like whenever I'm at Beacon and I'm working with the teenagers, that for me has always been kind of that reminder of God's presence. I never thought in a million years I'd be working with like teens. Like I'd always worked with kids, but I think at some point I was like, oh, I have no idea what else God can do with me. So that for me is kind of like a visual reminder of like God is present. He's still there. He still wants to use me. My car, I know that sounds kind of quirky. My car is kind of like a cool presence of God for me. There's a longer story that goes along with that, but like before I got the car that I have right now, my car before that completely like died, and so I really needed like God to come through and just provide me transportation, and how he provided my car was just mind blowing. My house. One thing that I do, and this is something really easy, if you, or, if somebody listening is trying to find maybe a way of being able to have a visual reminder, maybe you don't have anything yet and you want to find something. A really cool thing to do is at one point in a closet at my house, I had prayers on the wall that I would put on like sticky notes and put it up on my wall in my closet. And one side of my closet was dedicated to prayers that I was praying about, and the other wall on the other side were prayers that God had answered. And maybe they were like no's, yeses, or maybes. They're not always yes, side note. But I did that for a little while I was trying to build my relationship up with God. And I found that same closet. I hadn't been in it in a while, but I found the same closet recently and looked at the wall of prayers that I had been praying about, and it was blank because all of the things I was praying for at the time were actually on the other wall to show that God had answered them. So that was a really, really cool way for me to be able to have that visual reminder that, even when I'm having struggles, like, look at all the prayers that you were praying about, and God kept his promise and answered those. And that was a visual reminder of me, like, God's presence has always been there. And sticky notes are cheap, so have fun. But I think that's about it for at least our segment 2. Cameron, it's your favorite.
Trivia time, guys. The best segment.
Do you want to give our trivia question for this week?
All right. So, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong.
It's okay.
A chef's hat, also known as a toque or toque. Can't pronounce that correctly.
I think it's toque, but I have no idea. But yeah,
toque. A chef's toque is traditionally made with how many pleats? Hint: the number of pleats also represents the same number of ways you can supposedly cook an egg. So the amount of ways you can cook an egg is also the amount of pleats a chef's hat is made out of. It is definitely a surprise. I didn't know you could make eggs in this many ways. I do with like 3 or 4. I did not know it was quite this many.
I want a cookbook now of this many ways to cook an egg, because like you said, I've only ever eaten my eggs 3 or 4 different ways. I got my go-tos like scrambled or over easy, raw egg, or I'm just kidding. But
just like crack it into your mouth.
Yeah.
Don't even crack it, just put the whole thing in.
Why waste the pan? Why make a mess? Just put it in there, just crunch it. It's okay. But yeah, So you get like a 2-for-1 special on this trivia question. So if you don't happen to know how many pleats there are on a chef's toque, maybe you know how many ways you can supposedly cook an egg. I still am not necessarily sold that you can actually cook an egg this many times, but apparently you can. But who knows? If maybe next time, next podcast when we start this thing, if you know of some other ways to cook eggs than 4, good job, because I sure don't.
Yeah. Like think of like scrambled, hard-boiled, fried, and that's about all I know.
Poached. That one.
Oh, poached.
Did you say boiled?
Yeah, hard-boiled eggs.
Okay. Is soft-boiled egg just like another way of cooking it, but a little different? Does that count as 5?
My favorite form of eggs is deviled eggs. Oh,
there you go. There's 5 deviled eggs.
So good.
I can only get, I think, 5. I don't know of any more necessarily. And I can, at least this is another hint for you. There's a lot more than 5, supposedly. So if you know more than 5, maybe just start naming them off in your own head and then see how many you come up with. And we'll see how close you get next week when we announce the trivia question. So I don't necessarily have anything else, Cameron. How about you?
Nope. Just thank you for the fan mail, the Lawrence family. That was very kind of you. And be sure for everybody to go check out the social media. You can send us fan mail via DMs. You don't have to send a letter. That was really nice of them. Just if you like the podcast, send us a DM or just text the actual podcast social media, or you can text our personal social media. Tell us how much you love it. We really would love your feedback.
Absolutely. And share it out. Tell your friends. Tell your mom. Tell your dad. Tell your grandma. Tell your grandma's pet chihuahua. I don't care who you tell. But, tell everybody. Get it out there. It's a lot of fun. All right, everybody. Until next time, remember to be different, do different. Thanks.